So, Glen, who are you, where are you from? Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm Glen. I live on the Sunshine Coast of Sussex, so that's Eastbourne. If you don't know that, my Australian family thinks it's hilarious that Eastbourne is called the Sunshine Coast, because the Sunshine Coast in Australia is about 3 kilometres from the centre of the sun, and you can hear your skin audibly crackling in Australia. Not so in Sussex, but it's nice enough, so that's where I live.
Cool. And Glen, what do you do now? What do you do in Eastbourne?
Okay. Shall I use this, even if you're not? Yeah. What do I do? I am an Anglican minister, but I'm employed by a charity that frees me up to go around the place and shoot my mouth off about Jesus. That's my job, and it's a good job to have.
Okay, brilliant. While Glen's speaking, there's going to be a number that's about to come up onto the screen, and if you have any questions at all about what Glen's saying, about anything that it's made you think about, just text me to this number, and we'll try and get Glen to answer some of them at the end. Okay? So that number's going to be up the whole time, so text them in.
Great.
I'll leave you to it.
Okay, away I go. Brilliant. As you came in, perhaps you noticed one of these on your chair. If you haven't noticed it, you're sitting on it. This is a John's Gospel, and if you don't, let's say, if you don't have a Bible back in your room, this is our gift to you. Why don't you take this away and have a read of it? If you do have a Bible back in your room that you've kind of cracked open in the last year or so, then maybe just try not to get too much mayonnaise on it and leave it behind, and we can reuse it for tomorrow. But if you would like this, we'd love you to take it away and read it, because this is John's Gospel. This is part of the Bible. You might know that the Bible is actually a library of 66 different books, and in the New Testament there are these 4 biographies of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is the 4th biography of Jesus, called John. It's the most translated piece of literature in all the world. It's the most read and listened to piece of literature in all human history. So even if you don't think this is God's word, I think it's really worth you being familiar with it, because it is the most famous piece of literature ever written. And we would love you to take this and have a read, because we think that this gives you an insight into whether there is more to life. And that's our topic for today. We're thinking about, is there more to life? And as I begin talking about that topic, perhaps I can introduce to you an unhappy hypothetical. Okay, here's my unhappy hypothetical. Imagine that some masked gunmen burst into this room, and at gunpoint they all herd us down the stairs into these white vans that are just waiting, ready to capture us. And as we're herded into these white vans, and the white vans speed off down the road, we are injected with a serum that knocks us cold, and it completely wipes the memory banks, okay? It makes you forget everything you've ever said or thought or done. You forget who you are, where you've come from, all of that stuff. And then imagine you start to come to in a gigantic warehouse, this massive room. And there are no entrances, no exits, no windows, no doors. There's just you and a whole bunch of other guys in the room. And as you're groggy and as you start to come to, you start to have questions, don't you? Questions like, where am I? How did I get here? What is the meaning of all this? And is there anything beyond the room? Is there something that's more than the room? Those are all questions that you would probably ask in that situation, I'm sure. And as you all come to, and as you start to think about whether there's more to life than just the room, a few of you start to formulate some theories. So perhaps one of you would be Hopeful Harry, okay? Hopeful Harry stands up and he says, guys, I've got a really good feeling about this. Because Hopeful Harry is just like that. He's just optimistically wired. And he just says, you know, I just feel it in my bones. There's something more. There's something out there. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I think somebody out there likes us. Okay, that's Hopeful Harry in the room. But there's also Hopeful Harrys in life, aren't there? I've met many Hopeful Harrys, and Hopeful Harrys are great to have around, aren't they? Optimistic kind of people who think, somebody up there likes me. There must be more to life than this. I wonder whether you're a Hopeful Harry. That's one person in this room. Next to Hopeful Harry, up jumps Scientific Sally, okay? And Scientific Sally says, look, Harry, you're sweet, but let's actually do some tests. Let's think reasonably and rationally about this, shall we? And so Scientific Sally runs some tests, and she discovers that, lo and behold, this room is incredibly well designed. This room seems to be incredible architecture. And Scientific Sally develops a hypothesis, and she says, well, it's wonderful architecture, maybe there's an architect. And she calculates a few things, and she gets a few people onto her side, and she starts to say, guys, if there's a building, maybe there's a builder. If there's architecture, maybe there's an architect. Maybe the science of the room tells us that there is more to life. That's what Scientific Sally says in the room. And there are many Scientific Sallys in life as well. Perhaps you could Google the fine-tuning of the universe. That's a really interesting thing to study. Go onto YouTube and discover all these different videos about the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists who talk about the physical constants that describe physical reality. And many scientists have pointed out the fact that the balance between some of these constants has to be so finely tuned in order to permit life that it really beggars belief. So, for instance, the gravitational force to the electromagnetic force has to be correct within a millionth, or else we wouldn't be here to ask the question, is there more to life? Or a number that describes the expansion of the universe, the cosmological constant. That has to be just right. We have to be expanding quick enough to escape the gravity of the Big Bang and of the mass of the Big Bang. We have to be expanding quick enough, but not too quick, because if we expand too quick, we'll just fling out into heat death. So it just has to be just right, you know? So what is this Goldilocks range between crunching back in on ourselves and flinging out into heat death? What is the number that needs to be just right? Well, you can crunch the numbers, and you can discover that it has to be right to the degree of 1 part in 10 to the power 120. Okay, 10 to the power 120, if you're not a science kind of student, that is a 1 with 120 zeros after it, okay? There are only 10 to the power 80 atoms in the universe, right? Only 1 with 80 zeros after it, number of atoms in the universe. This number has to be right within 1 part in 10 to the power 120. This is astonishing. And so Scientific Sallys out there in the world say, you know what? It's not even that my life is on a knife edge. It's not just that planet Earth is on a knife edge. The entire cosmos seems to be balanced on this knife edge. What do you do with that? Scientific Sally says, if it's well built, maybe there's a builder. If there's architecture, maybe there's an architect. If there seems to be this finely tuned, designed world, maybe there's a designer. I don't know what you make of that argument, but that's what Scientific Sally says. Okay, back to the room. We've had Hopeful Harry, we've had Scientific Sally, and then a third person stands up on their feet, and they say, look, Harry, I like you. You're fun to be around. It's nice to have somebody who's positive all the time. Great. And Sally, that's nice that you've come up with these equations, these statistics. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're not. I can't judge this universe against any other universe. This is just the only universe we're in. So I'm just not sure what to do with the numbers that you've given me. To be honest, I don't care about what's beyond this room. What I care about is what is in this room. And I just want to make this room as good as I possibly can. I want to work for the common goods in this room. So can we just shut up about what's beyond? And can we just try to make this life as good as we can? That's skeptical Stephen. And there are skeptical Stephens in the world. And they say, look, why are we always wondering what's more to life? Haven't we got enough problems with this life? Shouldn't we focus on those problems? What do you make of skeptical Stephen? I've got a lot of time for skeptical Stephen. I think skeptical Stephen, out of those 3 people, I'm with skeptical Stephen, actually. You see, because I haven't yet described the Christian response to the room. I haven't yet told you what Christianity says. Hopeful Harry is not necessarily a Christian. Scientific Sally is not necessarily a Christian. Skeptical Stephen is not a Christian. What is the Christian response to the room? Well, imagine that these three guys, they're all sort of battling it out for who understands the room best. And then all of a sudden you notice that bits of the ceiling are crumbling down. Actually, there are bits of the ceiling crumbling down. Don't look now, but there are. Anyway, don't be distracted by what I just pointed to. And bits of the ceiling crumble down, and then all of a sudden, crash. A man appears in the center of the room. And he says, "I've come from beyond, and I'm here to rescue you." Do you think that changes the conversation in the room? What do you think? Do you think that changes the conversation? I mean, you might not believe this guy. You might be incredibly skeptical about this guy. You might just think this is cabin fever, okay? He's just gone doolally and he's making this stuff up. Or you might just think he's trying to get money out of me, get my credit card details out of me or something. You might have all sorts of reasons to doubt this man and his claims to come from beyond the room. But actually, his coming into the room and his claims about himself change the nature of the room. And for Christians, we say that's who Jesus is. Jesus comes into the middle of human history and he claims to be from out of this world. I mean, literally, on every page of this book, Jesus just keeps on talking about, I was there before the universe began. He says that a number of times in John's Gospel. He says things like, "I am the one bread of life. Without me, you go hungry forever." He says things like, "I am the one light of the world. Without me, you are in the dark. I am the one good shepherd. Without me, you are lost. I am the one source of life. Without me, you are perishing." He says, "I am the one way to God. I am the one truth about reality. I am the one life that is truly life." He even says at one point, if you want to know what God looks like, just keep looking right here. Isn't that? Like, if we get to know each other after this lunch bar and I ask you, "So, who are you?" And you start telling me, "Yeah, well, I predated the universe. I am the one source of life for the cosmos. I and the Father in heaven are one. I am the judge of all the world. And if you want to know what God looks like, just keep looking at me." If you start saying that to me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say, "That's nice. Why don't we now call somebody? And when that nice young man comes and asks you questions, why don't you tell him what you just told me?" Isn't that what we'd say to someone who makes such incredible, bizarre claims? But that is what Jesus claims on every page of this book. So what do you do with this guy? Jesus is claiming to be from beyond. And he also shows up in the middle of human history. This gospel, this eyewitness account is written down by John. And I don't know what else you want to do with the Jesus story, but it is very difficult to dismiss these gospels as ahistorical. People have tried to do it, and in my opinion, they fail miserably. Jesus really did live. He really did die under Pontius Pilate on probably the 9th of April AD 30. If it's not that date, it's close to that date. Under Pontius Pilate, he lived in human history. He died in human history. Christians claim he rose again in human history. So he is in the middle of the room as he makes these claims to be from beyond. And that's what makes Jesus so unique. You see, there are many people who claim to be from beyond, but no one really takes them seriously. I've met a couple of guys who have claimed in their life to be the Son of God. And you won't be surprised to learn that I met them on the mental health wings of hospitals, okay? They were not in a good place when they claimed to be the Son of God. In fact, funny story, a friend of mine actually became a Christian when he was having a psychotic episode, and he claimed to be the Son of God. And he was talking to someone else on the ward, and they said, "Oh, it's great to finally meet you." He was taking him seriously. "It's great to finally meet you, because I just couldn't understand this particular verse from the Bible. Could you explain it to me?" And my friend said, "I've never read the Bible, actually." And he said, "Well, what kind of son of God are you? You should at least read the Bible." And so my friend said, "Yeah, I probably should read the Bible." And he read the Bible. And then he said, I came to two incredible revelations as I did so. Revelation number 1, Jesus is the Son of God. Revelation 2, I'm not the Son of God. And he said that second revelation was the most incredible relief in his life. Can you imagine the weight of it? But When people say that they are the Son of God, we consider them to be lying. We don't consider them to be in a good place. But Jesus comes into the center of human history, and he is the most famous person who ever lived. He is the central figure in human history, and he has led the greatest sociological movement ever in human history. What do you do with a guy like that? He genuinely comes into the center of the room, and he genuinely claims to be from beyond. And I think he is the key to figuring out if there's more to life. You could be a hopeful Harry, and you could just hope for the best. You could be a scientific Sally, and you could do good science. You could be a skeptical Stephen and just build life now. And all of those things have wonderful things to recommend them. But the Christian response is Jesus has come into the center of human history, and he's worth checking out. Why don't we just turn just quickly to page 4 of these books. I'd love you to, like I say, if you want to take this home, please do take this home and keep on reading. I'm just going to introduce you to the first paragraph. And then once you've got the first paragraph under your belt, you can take it away and read it for yourself. But really, it's all about Jesus coming into the center of the room. So on page 4 is where it all begins. Page 4. And it says this: in the beginning was the Word, with a capital W, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. So in the beginning there's somebody called the Word. And in the Greek, which the New Testament was written in, it's the word logos. It's where we get logic from. It's a word that means meaning. In the beginning, there was meaning. Okay, this is not a meaningless cosmos. In the beginning, there was meaning, and that meaning was a person. Isn't that wonderful to know? That actually, as we are asking questions about is there more to life, the answer that the Bible's going to give us is, yeah, there is meaning, and that meaning is not some abstract philosophical truth. The real meaning to life is there is a person who loves you. He's called the Word. That means he is the explanation of God. My words are trying to communicate with you. And God's trying to communicate with us. How does he do it? By revealing Jesus. That's who the Word is. It says in verse 3 that through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Jesus, I hope you know that Christians, we don't just believe that Jesus was the sort of the founder of a religion. We believe that Jesus was the founder of the universe. That's certainly how he thought of himself. And he's either nuts or he's telling the truth. But what do you make of that? Jesus says he was the founder of the universe way back when. And then if you just let your eyes flick down to 2/3 down the page, verse 14. Little number 14 refers to verse 14. And it says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. So this is the one from beyond coming into the center of the room. This is the one who made us becoming flesh. It's the first Christmas this is talking about. Isn't it amazing to think that the maker of all things took flesh that had to be smacked as he came out of the womb to elicit that precious first breath, flesh that would get nappy rash, flesh that would get acne, flesh that would get sunburnt in the Mediterranean sun, flesh that could be cut and bleed, flesh that was cut and did bleed for you. You see, this is the story of what happened when meaning itself showed up. Meaning itself showed up, and he was like love covered over in flesh. That's who Jesus was, full of grace and truth. We'd love you to take this book away and keep on reading about the grace and the truth of Jesus. The sweetness, the poise, the mercy, the forgiveness of Jesus on the one hand, and the truth, the reality, that confrontation that Jesus brings as well. He's full of grace and truth and grace. And by the time you get to the end of this book, you'll see Jesus on a cross, the meaning of all the world. There he is with his arms outstretched, bleeding for the world. And in a sense, he's full of grace and truth in that moment. He's full of truth because he's telling us what was necessary in order for us to be rescued. You see, Jesus is full of light and life and love, but we have turned away from light and life and love, and therefore we are in the dark. We're disconnected, we're dying, we're perishing. And what does Jesus do? Jesus comes to rescue us. He comes to be with us. He comes to be for us. He comes to take that darkness, that death, that disconnection on himself. So he's telling the truth on that cross. He's showing us where we are as we are disconnected from God. We are in a pit. And there is Jesus with us and for us, with his arms outstretched. That's truth, but it's also grace. Because here is what Jesus does. Seeing us disconnected, seeing us in the dark, seeing us dying, he wants to take all that on himself and rise up again and to give us new life and light and love. This is the meaning that Jesus brings to us. There is more to life than just this. There's more to life than just the room. There's someone who has shown up in the middle of human history. His name is Jesus, and he loves you to death. If that were true, wouldn't that give meaning to your life? Wouldn't that give a context in which to live your life, knowing that you've been loved to hell and back? Wouldn't that give meaning to your life? Christians say absolutely, and we wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm going to stop talking now, and there is that number up on the screen if you want to text in any questions, and I'd be happy to answer them just in a minute. But while you're percolating that and thinking about questions, Alice is going to get up and give a notice.
Glenn, we've got a couple of questions for you. Okay, I'm just going to put this back up a bit. So, the first question we've got is, why wouldn't Jesus be like these other people who say they are the Son of God? Perhaps it was just a different time period that resulted in his mental state not being challenged.
Okay. So we have reasons today for not believing Jesus. We might think that he's suffering from some kind of mental illness and that sort of thing. Certainly, people talked about in the first century mental illnesses. They talked in terms of lunatics, which is a phrase that we quite rightly don't use these days, but they did have that category. So absolutely, Jesus was accused in his own day of being out of his mind. You could read John chapter 8, where people talk about him being out of his mind. So they did have that category. And many people did conclude that Jesus was out of his mind. Many others concluded that he was evil. That he was not from heaven, he was from hell. And what you get with Jesus is this interesting thing. Here comes this guy onto planet Earth, and no one can handle him. Some people think he's from heaven, people think he's from hell, but there is no earthly explanation for him. And what I find really interesting is how today we tend to domesticate Jesus, and we tend to have a kind of a meek and mild view of Jesus as though he was just a good teacher. But let me say to you provocatively, but if you think Jesus is just a good teacher, that only shows that you are not a good listener, okay? Because when you look at what he is teaching, he really is forcing you to a fork in the road. Either he's from heaven or he's from hell. People in his day had that dilemma, and people today have that dilemma. And you can conclude, if you like, that he is out of his mind or that he is evil. You can conclude that. But I would just urge you to keep on reading through John's Gospel and make up your own mind. Come along to Christianity Explored and make up your own mind. What do you think? Is he from heaven or hell? How do you explain this person, Jesus? Because I think the same issues that were back then are the issues that confront us today, and it's worth taking some time to wrestle it through.
Thank you. There are loads of really good questions here. So this next one is, are there any other people in the warehouse that you talked about who claim to have communicated with the outside?
Hundreds, right? Hundreds of people are claiming to hear voices from beyond. Hundreds of them. Jesus claims to be the one who made it all. Okay, so that's different, isn't it? So some people claim to be able to piece together evidence for an architect. Some people claim to be able to hear voices from beyond the room. Jesus claims to be the builder. He claims to be the architect. He claims to be the maker of the whole thing. And really that is unique. So Muhammad, for instance, receives revelations from Allah. That is the claim. But he is emphatically not Allah, and he would hate to be thought of as Allah, and quite rightly other Muslims would say, no, absolutely, Muhammad is not Allah. Buddha, for instance, claimed to be incredibly enlightened, but if you said, Buddha, are you the life source? Buddha would say, no, you need more enlightenment if you think that. Buddha was not going to be claiming that. Muhammad did not claim that. Jesus really is this unique figure in not only hearing voices from beyond, but claiming to be the one from beyond. Does that make sense? Hope so.
Get the next question. Okay, so next question. Why does Christianity give meaning to life? Why does God need us to love him? And there is no meaning to my life if it's to be someone else's slave.
Okay. Run through the first two. Can you say the first two again?
So why does Christianity give meaning to life? And why does God need us to love him?
Okay. It gives meaning to life because I think we are built for love. According to Christians, we are made by the God of love for love. He is our home. There is this God who is a God of light and life and love. There's a Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, this ultimate family. And we are meaningfully existing when we are home. And Jesus is the Son of God who has come to love us, to redeem us, to rescue us from all the darkness that is inside us, and to bring us home into his light and life and love. And when you are home in the love of God, then you are free. It's interesting, isn't it? When we think of the slavery point, we think of ourselves as free because I can do what I want any old time. Isn't that how we kind of think of freedom? Actually, we are most free when we are home. I often, speak at Freshers Weeks around universities, and it's a really interesting time where people are trying to be free and feeling lost. Did you have that experience when you were at Freshers Week? I mean, for a start, you don't know where anything is. You don't know where the lecture hall is, and you don't know where the library is. Probably after 3 years, you still don't know where the lecture hall is and the library is. But, and you feel like you want to get free, but you're lost and you're trying to find yourself. So we think in those terms. I just want to find myself, right? But if you're lost and you find yourself, that's no great find, is it? Right? Because you're lost. And finding a lost person is never much help, is it? Do you know where the lecture theatre is? No, I'm lost too. That's no great find. So we're a whole bunch of lost people and we're trying to find ourselves. Isn't that nuts? The story of the Bible is that someone from home has come to find us. And when we come home to his loving arms, we don't experience it as slavery, we experience it as love. And it's true, any relationship that you have, maybe from the outside it looks like a slavery. I remember it when I played cricket. I'd be, in the pub till late at night, and then one of the married guys would go home to his wife, and what would we all do? We'd all go, right? And then we'd have another 4 pints because we'd think, I wish I had someone to go home to, right? And from the outside, it's right? From the inside, it's coming home to love, and that's where you're truly free. And that's what Christians say about Jesus. It's coming home to your liberating lover, okay? That's who Jesus is. Cool.